In 1975, Phil Knight picked up the phone and heard the words that every founder dreads. The bank had frozen his account. Not slowed it, not flagged it, frozen it. The FBI had been called, and Blue Ribbon Sports, the company that would one day become Nike, had approximately enough cash left to survive for a few more days. Phil Knight was 37 years old. He had spent 13 years building this company from nothing, and in one phone call, it was gone. Or so it seemed. To understand how Nike almost died, you have to understand how it was born. It starts not in a boardroom, not with investors or venture capital. It starts with a 24-year-old and a crazy idea. 1962. Phil Knight has just graduated from Stanford Business School. Most of his classmates are heading to Wall Street or corporate America. Knight gets on a plane to Japan. He had written a paper at Stanford about a simple observation. Japanese manufacturers were making high-quality running shoes for a fraction of what German brands were charging in America. What if someone brought them over? He walked into Onitsuka Tiger's factory in Kobe with nothing but a business card and confidence he didn't entirely have. When they asked what company he represented, he paused and said Blue Ribbon Sports, a company that did not exist. They gave him a deal anyway. He flew home with samples, and with $50 borrowed from his father, Phil Knight started selling running shoes. Out of the trunk of his car, at track meets, in parking lots. He called his old university track coach, Bill Bowerman, asked if he wanted in. Bowerman put in $500. Knight put in $500. Blue Ribbon Sports was officially in business. Year 1, $8,000 in sales. Year 2, double that. Year 3, double again. Every year the company grew, and every year Phil Knight was completely, dangerously out of money. Here's the problem with growing fast when you're a shoe distributor. You need to order inventory months before you sell it, which means you need cash before the cash comes in. Knight went to the bank every year. Every year the bank looked at his numbers. A company with no safety net, borrowing everything, spending everything, and said some version of the same thing. We'll help you. But you're walking a very thin line. By the late 1960s, Blue Ribbon was doing $600,000 in annual sales. Knight asked his bank for a $1.2 million loan. The bank said no. Not no to that amount, no to any more money, at any amount. His credit line was maxed, no more extensions, no more favors, and if he missed a single payment, they'd walk. Phil Knight had a company doubling in size every year. He had demand he couldn't meet, he had customers ready to buy, and a bank that didn't care about any of that. He was too leveraged, too risky, too ambitious for a conservative Oregon savings bank that had never seen a company grow this way. In 1971, Knight found a lifeline. Nissho Iwai, a Japanese trading company with over $100 billion in annual revenues, agreed to finance Blue Ribbon's orders. The terms weren't easy. Nissho would take a royalty on every shoe sold, on top of charging market interest rates. But they said yes when every American bank had said no. And for a moment, just a moment, Phil Knight could breathe. But 1971 brought a different crisis. Knight had made the mistake of telling Onitsuka about the Nissho deal. Onitsuka understood immediately what it meant. A trading company that size wouldn't just finance orders. They'd push Knight to build his own brand, cut Onitsuka out entirely. So Onitsuka moved first. They began quietly negotiating with other American distributors to replace Blue Ribbon. Knight found out he was facing the end of his supply, the end of his product line, and potentially the end of everything. His entire business was built around Onitsuka shoes. Without them, there was nothing to sell. So Knight made the most audacious decision of his life. He'd build his own shoes, his own brand, before Onitsuka could cut him off. He needed a name. One of his employees suggested Nike, the Greek goddess of victory. Knight wasn't sure. He said, I don't love it, but maybe it'll grow on me. He needed a logo. He hired a graphic design student named Carolyn Davidson and paid her $35 for something she could put on a shoe. She drew the swoosh, the most recognizable logo in the history of sport, for $35. And then Bill Bowerman, sitting at breakfast one Sunday morning, stared at his wife's waffle iron and had an idea. What if the same pattern on the waffle, all those little squares, could be pressed into rubber? He poured liquid urethane into the iron, destroyed it completely, tried again, and eventually created the waffle sole, one of the most revolutionary designs in running shoe history. Lighter, more grip, better performance. Nike launched in 1972 at the US track and field trials. Runners loved the shoes. Orders came in. The brand was real. But the money situation was about to get much, much worse. In 1977, the US Customs Service sent Nike a bill, $25 million in import duties. The argument was technical, an arcane trade law called the American Selling Price Rule, which said that if a similar shoe was manufactured in America, import duties should be calculated at 20% of the American wholesale price, not the actual manufacturing cost. Nike's actual tax bill under normal rules, $2.5 million. Under the American Selling Price Rule, $25 million. Nike did not have $25 million. Nike did not have anything close to $25 million. If the government enforced this ruling, the company was finished. Knight described what followed as an absolute war. He lobbied lawmakers, he fought through the courts, he pushed back against a law he believed was unjust for 3 years. 3 years of living with that number hanging over the company. $25 million. Every morning, every meeting, every decision made in the shadow of a bill that could end everything overnight. In 1980, the government settled. Nike paid $9 million, not $25 million, 9. Knight had fought the United States government, and while he hadn't won completely, he had survived again. On December 2, 1980, the same year the customs battle ended, Nike went public. 2.3 million shares, $22 a share. The company that had started with $1,000 between two men, that had sold shoes from the trunk of a car, that had been frozen out by its bank, betrayed by its supplier, threatened by its own government, was now worth hundreds of millions of dollars. But here's what gets lost in that story. The IPO is the ending everyone focuses on. Nobody talks about the phone calls, the frozen accounts. The Knight lay awake wondering if he could make payroll. He spent 18 years building a company that almost collapsed a dozen times before it became stable. There's a line in Phil Knight's memoir that captures all of it. The cowards never started. The weak died along the way. That leaves us. Today, Nike is worth over $100 billion. But before it was a logo on the world's greatest athletes, before it was a $35 billion a year company, before Just Do It, it was a man with $50, a fake business card, and a refusal to stop. If you like this story, subscribe, because the next one is just as good.